Oh, special education is joining me again for the big show. What do we got here? We got Hump Day Wednesday. What's going on in the world today? Big news of the day. Sean Dollinger has launched a legal action against the company of which he was the CEO, and he is still the founder. So we're going to talk to Sean a little bit later in the show and get his side of the story, which will be probably quite interesting. I'm just going to take a wild guess.
You know, there's several sides to a story, isn't there?
Always.
If there's two people involved, there's two sides. If there's four people involved, there's four sides.
Well, I don't know.
It goes from a line to a rectangle.
But don't the possible combinations of influence and story increase by an exponential factor with
that's
every
a good
single
point.
Edition?
So
when you add four people, arguably you have 242 possible variations on the story.
Where'd you get 242?
Well, there was a 2 in there. There was a 4. I just thought I'll pick those numbers.
Why not just say 24?
Well, because that's a fraction of 242. That's 10.1%.
I digress. What are you thinking here?
I've got a mug.
I got a no mug.
And I have no mug on my mug. This is a mugless mug. If you haven't been watching the show, you're thinking, boy, this guy's a real mug.
So the marijuana stocks came off a bit today, didn't they?
Came off a bit. Looks like the party's over. The ship is sinking. Everybody's looking for a chair. The music is stopped.
I want to make a point about what I've seen in the space. It seems like when a trend starts, it goes on for a while.
Yes.
And when another trend starts, it goes on for a while. So all I'm saying is, if you got some nice profits here, maybe you go to cash and you wait a bit. You know, I'm not saying it not indiscriminately.
What if your entry price is already fallen below? What if the stock has already fallen below your entry price, and it's like you're basically locking in the loss? Is one to infer from this small dip in the market that maybe, for the sake of safety, get on the sidelines, or is one going to sell out actually at a discount just before the next leg up takes everything much higher, and now you're chasing the stock?
Well, that's the question. But what if right now you're sitting there, you got a nice profit, and it's rolling over. The S&P is off here.
Yeah, what's the S&P doing?
It's down about 8 points, I think.
8 points. That barely counts.
That's where it starts.
That's a big market.
Yeah, yesterday we talked about the marijuana stocks were just down a little bit. Now they're down a lot. So, why wait?
Well, look at the charts and all these stocks. It's time to be taking profit. Obviously there's a huge day trading component in there, and those day traders have made 15 to 20% in the last 10 trading cycle, 10 trading
You know that
sessions.
a lot of the marijuana stocks are already off 25% from the highs?
As of today?
Yeah.
So...
Like Khiron was down at 2.25. It hit 313.
Yeah.
Quick calculation there tells me that it was off about 28% from the peak to the reaction low. But now it has bounced back to 260.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? I guess they're raising some dough here.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just got notice in my BMO new issues window about Khiron doing a raise, and would I like some?
They were going to do 20, and they increased it already to 25.
There you go. So, I actually put up my hand. I'm going to buy into this round.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Your standard $1,000?
$1,000?
Is there a $5,000 minimum on this?
It's actually a $100,000 minimum.
Do you ever feel a little like you're a bit of a piker when you put in $1,000?
I tell you.
James puts his hand up and says, I'm in for 1,000.
Put me down for 1,000.
Yeah. And if I really like it, I'll go to 1,200.
Yeah. No,
I jest.
I know.
I don't want to talk about specifics.
I put up my hand for 10,000 shares. It's $22,700.
Nice little tidy sum.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to have to sell something. Well, so yeah, let's see here. I'm gonna bring up that IPO. So under IPO new issuers, if you are on the, wait a sec here.
Can I make a comment?
This is interesting. So I just jumped on the new issue for this stock this morning, and it's already disappeared from the IPO and new issuers price. So that I imagine means it's sold out.
Yeah, no, it's that. Whenever they raise, like, they announced, I think immediately they were out of the 20, and now they picked up another 5 million. So hot off the press, and the stock is 260 as last time I saw it. So that's further confirmation.
Sold out. It says right here, sold out. New issues, sold out. So let's click on that. It was $2.20 per share was the actual price. So
with, including a warrant probably, or half a warrant or something.
It actually doesn't say that. Download term sheet. Here we go. $22.20 a share, 15% over allotment. Wow. Now, you know what? It's a straight share, no warrant. Now you know that the company is looking strong if they can command a straight share deal, no warrant.
And
close it the day they announce it. Well, which is normally what you would do if you were any kind of...
And I always feel when a company raises that kind of money in this space, it just adds to the strength. Like that I think I told you, Harry Leishman said, cash isn't dilutive. In other words, cash is so critical for the survival and growth of a nascent company.
Nascent. Ooh, I almost need to high five you on that one.
Go ahead anyway.
Nascent.
No, and yeah, because now this company's got...
What's the definition of nascent, Ed?
I think early stage. Am I wrong?
No, not really. But it's just a funny way to say it. It's like, I think the definition of nascent, which somebody's going to look up for us in any minute now, is new.
Well, it's a new industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
But early stage is an interesting way to say it because you immediately categorize the idea of new in the context of a issuer.
Like a baby is kind of new.
A baby?
Yeah.
Well, the baby's only new on the first day.
But it's still early stage.
I guess technically a baby's new until you've seen it. Did you hear about the baby? Yeah. Have you seen it yet? No. Well, go see the new baby. Right? But if
once you've seen it, it's no longer new.
Right. Did you see the baby? Oh, that old thing? Yeah, I saw the baby.
So can you say, like a newspaper? That's a newspaper.
Well, that's a whole other can of worms.
Newspaper.
Newspaper? What is a spaper? A spaper is like something you used to roll up like...
Look at Khiron, look at this, shooting up there 267.
See, now that is a textbook performance by the guys around this company. We're going to announce a deal at a severe discount to the market. We're going to close the deal a couple hours later, and then the stock's going to roar past the issue price and put on, a serious performance.
I got to tell you, I really think the A-team is involved in this deal. I'm just saying, from everything I see, the market cap was never really that out of whack. Certainly, it looked cheap relative to everything else. And as we're seeing now, it was cheap.
Ed, you're talking about new and nascent. What about the news? Let's ask Ricky.
Thanks, James, and here are the headlines moving markets today. Aphria Inc. has announced its board of directors has rejected the bid by Green Growth Brands to acquire all of the outstanding common shares of the company. Based on the 20-day volume-weighted average price of GGB shares immediately before GGB's announcement of an intention to acquire the common shares of the company, the bid reflects a 23% discount to the company's share price over the same period. Aphria stated that the board unanimously recommends that shareholders reject the bid and do not tender their shares. The board made its recommendation after careful consideration and receipt of the recommendation of a committee of its independent directors, who were advised by financial and legal advisors. Namaste Technologies announced that Sean Dollinger has taken issue with the company's actions and commenced legal proceedings against the company. The matter is now before the Ontario Superior Court of Justice commercial list, and Sean Dollinger will be joining James later on in the show. Khiron Life Sciences Corp has entered into an agreement with Canaccord Genuity Corp and BMO Capital Markets as co-lead underwriters and joint book runners. The underwriters have agreed to purchase 9.1 million common shares of the company on a bought deal basis pursuant to a short form. Health Canada has suspended the license of Winnipeg cannabis producer Bonify. The federal agency says this was done over concerns the company was possessing, distributing, and selling product from an illegal source. Last December, Health Canada issued a recall on 2 Bonify strains over contamination concerns. iAnthus Capital Holdings and MPX Bioceutical Corporation have closed the previously announced plan of arrangement for iAnthus to acquire all of the issued and outstanding common shares of MPX. Holders of MPX shares received 0.1673 common shares of iAnthus for each MPX share held, representing a premium of 30.6% based on the closing price of iAnthus and MPX shares on October 17, 2018. In addition, each MPX shareholder received common shares of newly formed MPX International Corporation, which holds all the non-U.S. cannabis businesses of MPX. And the CEO of iAnthus Capital Holdings will be joining James later on in the show. 48 North Cannabis Corp announced the closing of its $10 million private placement. Following the completion of the $3 million strategic investment from Canopy Growth Corporation, 48 North closed on the additional $7 million from a leading U.S.-based private investment fund, the second and final tranche of its $10 million private placement. Dixie Brands, Inc. announced plans to bring its line of edibles and other THC-infused products to Michigan through a joint venture with Choice Labs. Based in Jackson, Michigan, Choice is a vertically integrated and licensed marijuana grower, processor, and retailer. Dixie branded products will be available as early as March 2019 for Michigan's approximately 300,000 medical marijuana patients. The initial product list is expected to include tinctures, mints, pressed pills, gummies, topicals, and the company's flagship, Dixie Elixir beverages. Lit Cannabis Corp has entered into a joint venture agreement with a private British Columbia corporation for a second cannabis cultivation property located in Chase, British Columbia. Pharmacello Limited announced that its Colombian subsidiary has received approval for the listing of 10 proprietary and unique THC and CBD strains with the National Cultivar Registry. The company can now proceed to commercial registration, production, and sale of these strains within the Colombia market as well as for export to global markets. And that's your news for today.
You got to do that more often.
That was Ricky's idea.
What the hell? Ed, cameo by Ed in the news segment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep abreast.
Keep abreast?
Where would I keep it?
Well, exactly. And whose breast was it? Or is it?
Abreast of the news.
Abreast of the news. I think there's a hashtag #MeToo threat in there somewhere. I'm not going to elaborate anymore, just so I don't give anybody any ideas.
You want to try to take it any way you want. Let's look at Tilray's chart here.
Ricky's talking to lawyers. Actually, let's pull up the chart of Tilray, but then Khiron. I want to look at Khiron intraday.
Tilray first, and then Khiron.
Because Khiron's this offering process of Khiron's is really a case of a absolutely perfectly managed public offering.
I don't think you want to say it that way, though. I mean, it appears to be perfectly managed, but I think
it's perfectly managed when you do all the right steps.
They got lucky.
No, I don't think there's too much luck involved there.
We got a moving right along here.
And I'm not suggesting that it was manipulated. If that's what you're implying.
You're not suggesting perhaps there was
No, I'm saying that before they announced it, that they already knew who was going to be a likely buyer. And they announced it in the morning, they closed it in the afternoon, and proof positive that the demand was not filled, was the stock took off higher. See, this is the thing. This is what I'm saying. This was a well-managed offering.
Yeah, but I mean,
they didn't take all the demand for the stock out there and put it in the private placement. They left some out in the market, so that those who got cut back in the private placement, it's like, well, if you want it, now you have to come into the market and get it. Okay. You don't agree. Fine. I'm out of here.
No, I think I do agree. But I would say it slightly differently.
Oh, okay. How would you say it?
I would say,
Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party?
No, look at what can you say? The stock shot up to 313. Woo! And they're not being piggish about it. No. They're being smart. Because you create winning shareholders, and you know what you got? You got their ear down the road. Yeah. And because, they're going to try and build a monster here. That's what I say.
Well, that's just it. By only issuing 9.1 million shares for $20 million at $220, when we know the market was a lot more in demand than that, that shows you that they're thinking, well, we don't need to dilute our shareholders.
Well, I should have put up the Khiron chart first.
Okay.
But I've already got this one up. So let's quickly look at Tilray, and then we'll go right to Khiron. So look, we've got there's your line of support.
Yeah.
There's the line of decline and the line of support. That's the line of support. That looks like it may hold, but it also may not. So you got your there.
That sounds pretty decisive.
You got your there.
May hold, it may
and
not.
There you got your there. See? There it is again.
Look at that. What are you drawing, Ed?
You know what Victor calls it, eh?
It's an ass. I don't know.
Cock and balls. I don't know. That's what he called it.
That's just a new level of rude that I guess.
You know what? I think we all know. Look, there's no big surprises here anymore in 2019.
No.
There's no more. Oh my gosh! I saw his woo. Like
woo woo.
Wee wee. Okay. So let's clear the deck here. I think there's a major line there that's got to be
backfilled.
Look, if it breaks that, I'm going to tell you right now.
Yeah.
Not the top part here.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's get the Khiron.
All right. Tell you what, we'll do that when we come back. But first, we're going to take a look at what's happening today in the show. Okay. Just because that's what I'm being told to say by mysterious voices in my head. Kill Ed, kill Ed. Tina Byers from AlphaNorth Asset Management will be joining me here in just a moment. But then Hadley Ford, CEO of iAnthus, is going to join us live via Skype. Boy, whoever thought that would be so hard to say. And then 3:35, it is going to be Afzal Hasan is going to be here from Origin House. He is the president of Origin House. Mark Lustig is the CEO. But now, without further ado, I'm joined by Tina Byers from AlphaNorth Asset Management. How are you, Tina?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. I can't believe it's been this long before we've had you on the show. I've known you for years, practically.
Yeah, Steve's been on the show.
I know.
Kind of recently.
And you're way more prettier, for sure, and probably, I'm going to say smarter as well. No, I'm just kidding.
Steve doesn't wear makeup, so.
That's true, at least not during the day. No, I'm just kidding. So Tina, tell me, what do you do at AlphaNorth Asset Management?
I'm a portfolio manager at AlphaNorth. So we have 3 funds. Our flagship fund's a hedge fund. We look at sub-100 million market cap companies, and it's diversified, so really focusing on high growth opportunities. And we have 2 mutual funds as well that are focused on the 100 million to billion market cap. So mostly small and micro cap space.
Okay, would it be impertinent to ask how much assets under management at AlphaNorth?
We have about 40 million right now.
Okay, great. Do you guys participate in the cannabis space at all?
We do, yeah. In terms of what we're invested in, we haven't been looking strictly at the LPs, I guess. We do trade them in and out. In terms of an investment, we think that a lot of them are overvalued, but we've been looking a lot at ancillary services like extraction companies or some technology companies or beverages, or it's kind of a different angle to the cannabis space that I think is a little bit more undervalued.
Wow, that's probably a good thing, especially looking at the LP prices today. Okay, so what sector is AlphaNorth most interested in, would you say, in terms of industrial sectors?
I guess we look at the industrials a little bit. I think for our hedge fund, we're focused largely on tech and healthcare, biotech, and we do a little bit of resources as well. I think this year the resources are due for a bit of a comeback, so I think that's a space that we're paying more attention to rather than the cannabis space last year, although I do think there's still going to be a trade in cannabis this year. So
Right. Interesting. Are you in the camp that believes that a recession is coming in 2019, or are you in the camp that is more bullish on the general broad market?
I'm a little bit more bullish, I'd say. I don't think 2019 is the year. It could be a little bit further out. In terms of the S&P, we're still trading at 13.5 average, which is partly because of the energy space. I think if that comes back and some of these resources come back, there's still some room to go. And within resources, what are your favorite sort of commodities that you're following? I like the energy space. I think it's been kind of controversial lately. I
you mean oil and gas?
Yeah,
okay.
Mostly oil, I'd say.
Okay.
The valuations are just lower than they've ever been, I think. So some of the names have had to pop back up, but for the most part, they're not getting the credit that they have, given that WCS has come back a bit and WTI is also like trading just under $55. So. And most of the big energy companies reported pretty decent earnings this quarter, the past quarter. Yeah, well, Suncor came out with their numbers today. They were a little bit lower than expected on a cash flow basis, but they increased their dividend.
I wasn't including the Canadian oil sands guys in that mix, because I mean, oil sands in Canada are just such a sort of stranded resource because of all the problems we're having getting pipelines and transportation out of there.
Yeah, it's been really tough, I think, for a lot of the Canadian companies, as you can see by their share prices, but you get to a certain point where a lot of the companies have contracted their costs, and their netbacks are doing okay, and they're able to manage their costs at like way better than they were able to a few years ago. So I think now is kind of a good time to be buying and looking at these valuations and realizing that they are quite cheap given the
Are you again referring to the large caps more or less, or to
more so on the small caps for investment purposes?
Can you talk about any names specifically?
Sure. Yangera is a company that I really like. It was trading really well for the last few years. 2018 was kind of a rougher year for the company.
Yangera?
Yangera Resources. It's YGR ticker. But they grew their production 65% last year.
Where are they producing?
They're in Alberta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good old Southwestern Basin, or the good old Alberta Basin.
They do get Edmonton par pricing though for their oil, so it's a little bit better than the WCS. So.
Okay. You know, it's funny. I mean, you can't be Canadian without having been in the energy space as an investor, but it's been so long, largely because of cannabis, but also the mining market took such a plunge that I've just, you know, the resource sector has not been kind to me, so let's just say. So it's amazing, I used to follow it so closely and sort of have an idea of any company that was, and now it's just like, I have no clue anymore what's going on because it's so hard to stay interested in the energy sector. So what about minerals?
Minerals, we've been looking at some of the base metals. This past year, they haven't been performing that well. It's interesting to look at some of the charts for the base metals because you can see when Trump got into the office, the base metals actually performed quite well because of all of his infrastructure promises. And then I guess between the China trade talks, all of those gains were basically washed away. So I think this year is kind of another time to start taking a look at that again, but it's definitely been hard on some of the mining companies as well.
Yes. Would you agree with this sort of general idea that there is an imminent convergence between supply and available demand, or available supply and demand for certain minerals like zinc, copper especially? Certainly uranium starting to look like it's catching a bid, and I mean, it looks to me like there could be a broad return to resources in the, I don't know, I'm not going to say when obviously, but at some point in the near future it looks like it's their turn.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the space. Like even some of the industrial metals like iron ore has been a really strong outperformer. I think some of them could have their chance, but it'll be tough in this market if cannabis catches a bid again. So because that's just kind of where the retail, it's easy to understand, and that's where the retail is moving right now. So.
Do you think that the weakness in commodities or resource sector and tech sector and biotech sector is largely a result of the absolute mania that's engulfed the cannabis space currently?
I think so. It's just like you've seen such great performance from these cannabis companies. So if you're going to allocate your money somewhere, it seems like to a certain extent, there's less risk by putting it into a cannabis stock and seeing it pop 2 or 3 times kind of on the open, whereas the mining sector is much slower moving, and it could take some time to see some of those results, and the uncertainty of pricing is really not really driving investors towards that space right now. Right.
The events that would be required to really drive interest into resources broadly across the Canadian investor landscape, do you think one of those would have to be a downturn in the cannabis sector to the point where people started to lose interest and started to look for an alternative, believing that the bloom had finally come off the rose in cannabis? Or do you think that that's really not a realistic expectation given the fact that we're still at the front end of a global revolution in cannabis sort of availability and regulation?
I think some of the money will have to roll out of that space in order for the resources to catch a bid. There's a lot of uncertainty still around the trade wars and what's happening in Alberta for energy pricing. So I think once some of that gets cleared up a little bit, there could be more interest. But really, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the cannabis space this year. I think when we get towards October, when edibles are starting to become a part of the Canadian market, I think some of the names could catch a bid then as well. But on a quarterly basis, when we see the financials of these cannabis names, it could also affect some of the numbers to the downside and performance that way. So,
do you get a sense at all that the supply of grown cannabis is going to be reaching a state of oversupply anytime soon as a result of the continuing explosion of cannabis companies in both North America and elsewhere in the world now more so?
It's hard to say right now because there's so many companies that are popping up. So, they all claim that they're going to be sold out of product immediately. And I can see the demand. If you look at the States, there is quite a bit of demand. One of the other things that is playing a role in the supply-demand imbalance is just the quality control of some of these companies. They're going through the QA/QC process, and a lot of the product isn't passing the quality. So it's not necessarily a reflection of how much the companies are producing, but how much is actually getting past the quality control. So,
So is that then responsible in part for the shortage of cannabis products in the online cannabis stores run by governments? Is that they've got this huge supply, it gets to the quality testing phase, and only a fraction of that gets through?
I think that's part of it. I think Health Canada's been very slow, I guess, in terms of how many SKUs they'll allow to the market. So there's a couple of larger companies that have dozens of SKUs, but they're only allowed to put through a couple on the OSC website or some of the dispensaries. So I think that's also been a bit of an issue. Right.
In terms of the cannabis opportunities in Europe versus the United States, so there's a large chorus of analysts recommending that Canadians or investors everywhere should be now looking to the US MSOs as a better value for investors now, given their state of evolution they're at relative to the Canadian landscape. And I'm always wondering, well, what about the European landscape? The European landscape's obviously a much bigger market than even the United States in its entirety, well, at least somewhat bigger. And it's only the Canadians really who are able to service the European opportunity. So I listen to that sort of argument from the analysts, usually coming from banks that are financing the US MSOs, so therefore their compelling logic is there for a reason. But do you see that as any kind of, do you agree with that? Do you think that's true, or do you think there's still a lot more value in the MSOs to be unlocked in the US?
I think it's a good point. In terms of exporting to Europe, there's definitely a good opportunity there. I think Canada will start to see more competition. It's still really early, so they definitely have a leg up, and some of the companies that have been able to get financing can definitely grow at a more rapid pace than their US competitors at this point, who are starting to get more financing, mostly through Canadian investors. But there is that opportunity in Europe that the US companies don't necessarily have, although I think right now, in terms of the multiples that they're trading at, the US seems to be quite cheap in comparison.
All right, Tina, well, that's a great initial interview with you. I'm so glad to finally have you on the show.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it there for now. I'm going to come back to you in due course and have you back again.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We're starting to take a look at some of the additional opportunities here at Midas Letter in the area of swag. So we have started to develop a line of products, and we're going to be looking to the audience to vote on some of their favorite products. And I'm wondering if you can get those up for us, Mark? There we go. So this is the t-shirt. So what I'm looking for here is a feedback in the audience commentary section as to which of these products you would be more inclined to buy on the store, assuming that you were interested in any of them. So there's, of course, the gear for consuming cannabis, and then there's the apparel. Those are actually multi-page demonstrations. So this is your basic pipe. I like to call it the corncob pipe look. There's your bubblers, which I don't know, those are kind of funny looking. But we're gonna, and there's your typical grinder. Now, if you ever wanted a Midas Letter grinder, now's your chance. Put up your hand. Tell us what you like the best. And we'll come back to this discussion a little later in the show. Right now, I'm joined by Afzal from, whoa, did I go blank there?
Origin House.
Origin House.
Good to see you.
Afzal, how's it going, man? Sorry about that.
Good.
I OD'd on CBDs this morning, and it seems to be a little more psychotropic.
Swag and accessories probably gets you spinning, right?
That's right. How have you been?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me on again.
You bet. So Origin House, this is interesting, is coming close to the stock price that it was at when I last started accumulating it. So I'm like thinking, oh, it's it's time to start maybe accumulating again. What's new in the world of Origin House?
We're keeping active and busy. The last few weeks, we put out a series of our brand acceleration deals. So that's been the focus for the past handful of weeks. And I think I'd alluded to that being the focus for us the last time I was on too. We're now starting to show the results of the brand building exercises that we've been engaging in over the last handful of months. So exciting times for sure.
Right. And exactly when you say brand acceleration, maybe just give us an update on that for those who might not have caught the last episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a program that is still in active evolution right now. What we're looking to create is this program or platform that allows really unique, interesting brands with compelling products or authentic experiences to partner up with us in California and really leverage the benefit of this model that we're creating as a larger, more diversified company. So the theory here is you pair up our infrastructure, our expertise, our capital, and that experience that we have from having been an operator in the space for quite some time with these really unique ideas or entrepreneurs, and you theoretically might be able to leverage the best of both worlds. And this is a recipe and model that you see in the typical real world most of the time without the need for any sort of an accelerator, because it's common for you to be able to find partners. In this case, in the cannabis industry, much harder for people to find reputable partners that are there for the long term, and that's what we're trying to furnish for entrepreneurs out there in the space.
So on February 4th, you announced a $704,000 investment into Humboldt's finest, an allegiance of heritage cannabis farms representing Humboldt County. Is that sort of a good case example of your acceleration program?
Absolutely. I mean, the folks at Humboldt's Finest have been partners with our distribution company for quite some time. And this deal allowed us to put some capital into this company that represents a really unique, authentic brand that has been around for quite some time and is quite heavily involved with its community. So both this transaction with Humboldt's Finest as well as the transaction that we had with Henry's Originals, the key element that was really compelling to us was being able to not just make a sensible investment that's going to drive our business and drive a potential brand, but also indirectly support communities that are critical for the long-term success of this industry. So providing capital to these companies actually filters out into their communities and allows them to pay cash to farmers and do things that farmers in those areas have just never been able to access in a meaningful way. So we're really excited about that, and that's part of the power of this platform, is being able to achieve a variety of different end goals while also driving good business for ourselves.
You bet. So just to sort of segue, because I think you're probably perfectly positioned to talk about this, one of the problems I find with the cannabis available in Canada through the legal system is that the time frame from harvest through testing to irradiation, which is common, to packaging, means that by the time it gets to you, it's generally too dry, and all those processes have had such an effect on the flavor that the perishable nature of cannabis has been overlooked completely, and you're left with what I can only categorize as a really inferior product. And certainly I think in the case of especially producers in Humboldt County, where the concept of cannabis as a perishable good has been long held in high regard as a default reality, is there a better process and a shorter timeline for getting fresh cannabis that's just finished its ultimate curing process? I'm talking obviously in the case of premium flower, to market into the hands of consumers in a more compressed way than there is in Canada?
I would say that generally it's better because we have a lot more maturity and experience in the industry, so you're not going to get as many of the learning and growing pains you see in Canada, which is we're just doing this for the first time, we screwed up X or Y or Z, and that caused a hiccup in our timeline that has pushed things out. So from that angle, California, but a lot of other states are better off because their infrastructure and systems are just more finely tuned. But the flip side of it is that it's a constant gripe for us as well. When we get products in, we need to send them out for testing. The rules for testing are still in evolution right now. I think they're moving in a sensible way where you can have the ability to potentially do things like test flower up front and then manufacture products like pre-rolls out of them without having to retest over and over again. So those are things that I think represent improvements and efficiencies that we're eventually going to see happen in Canada too. But a really interesting aspect about this that most people aren't aware of that ties back to Humboldt and Mendocino again is a belief that I've seen reiterated by a number of entrepreneurs in the market that have a lot of experience that outdoor cultivated cannabis will have a much better shelf life and profile over time versus indoor cannabis. The argument over there is that because of the fact that it has been exposed to the elements naturally through the course of its life, it has better characteristics to be able to preserve some of its smell, taste, and effect versus indoor cultivated cannabis. So this is something that is more anecdotal than factual, and then obviously some of these characteristics that you're pointing to are very subjective for users too, so you might not be able to test them. But there is an interesting kernel that interests us in that outdoor side of it for potentially some of the aspects you're touching on, which is longer term shelf life. And I can say from actual observation, again, anecdotal, we have seen outdoor products that are anywhere from 6 months to a year in terms of age that feel like they're just as good, if not better, than when they started off. So that might be part of the answer or the solution too.
Sure. Certainly I've noticed with outdoor cannabis, it's like everything is more robust in terms of structure. That, you know, the stalks just seem that much stronger. The leaves are thicker. They're able to sort of withstand direct sunlight more, and they're just less delicate. So I could see that being the case. Does Origin House? So I mean, it's hard to keep up with the pace of evolution of your company, and it's like I'm always looking at this and going, what does this mean in the context of like all of the assets now under Origin House? So like, how do you how does one think of the asset mix of Origin House right now? You've gone from becoming sort of portfolio investors to becoming owner operators of brands that you acquire or develop to the point where they're mature and then incorporate them into your sort of distribution mix. So maybe if you could just give me a total overview of all of the things that Origin House has going for it right now, because I think a lot of investors have the same problem. They can't see the forest for the trees.
It's complex in a lot of ways, but when you understand the model, you realize that it's actually quite simple. So the front line of our business is the same, regardless of what products we're selling. It's distribution. All the products that we either sell or carry from third parties, they go through our distribution subsidiaries. So every dollar of revenue that we generate in the US and California from our cannabis business goes through distribution. When you take a step back from distribution, distribution gives us a certain level of return on the products that we're selling, but we then have involvement with products that can range from ownership completely to also partway down that pathway of doing contract manufacturing or other support services. So one step back from distribution on the value chain is when we do pick, pack, and ship for companies. So we'll get raw inventory, then have to package it up in our facility and put it into boxes and packages for dispensaries. That's a function that we'll take on for companies that's more distribution related. But then you start to get to activities that are another further step back from that. So when we talk about our deal with Viola that we did not so long ago, one of the aspects that we're exploring with them is to purchase the raw flower that they were using on the market, but then be the processor and packager for that raw flower. So taking it from an unprocessed good to a processed good. And that's another way that we get more involved with the brand. As you follow that chain backwards, you'll see that we're involved in each step of the value chain with the brands, well, some of the brands that we own all the way through. But we're essentially offering brands a menu, which is start off with distribution, and then we'll happily do as much or as little as you need, but it's a choose your own adventure experience. So we have the capabilities not just for distribution, but for this warehousing and manufacturing and processing for just any type of product. We have the in-house capabilities, in-house kitchens, as well as the ability to fill vape cartridges and roll pre-rolls, so manufacturing is there. We don't presently extract in-house because there's a very active and robust market for bulk cannabinoids out there in California, but we are, as part of our longer term, building out some of those capabilities for companies that require that level of control over their product. And finally, on the cultivation side, we did a deal a handful of months ago for a facility that we've called internally Cub City, where we allow for craft cultivation. Similar type of opportunity. It's pick your own adventure. If you need it, we've got it, and that's part of the all-in package that we're trying to create. But if not, we're happy to also work with companies as just their distributor, because for us, it's a expand and scale and learn motto, as opposed to trying to own everything and do everything ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting what you describe. You know, it's like that you could never do that in Canada because the rules are so restrictive in terms of how companies can interact and what is possible in terms of the product mix. And I look at the Canadian, you know, advantage in that we were first with a national strategy in a G7 country, but we've got this total restrictive regime. In the United States, you've got all this whole spirit of enterprise, anything goes, if it's a good idea, let's do it kind of approach. But you've got the restriction of, you know, segregated markets in the form of state borders and everything, and a federal prohibition. If only they could, you know, everybody could accept everything, and then it would be true free and open market. Mm-hmm. Do you think that California is, you know, a good model for Canada? I mean, we're in Canada, you guys operate in California, but do you think Canada could learn from California at this point in terms of, like, you're not going to really do anything by having such restrictive regulations except limit the opportunities of this emerging sort of market?
Yeah, I've long been a proponent of the intellectual property and experience that has been developed in California, not just from the cannabis perspective, but just generally from the consumer packaged goods perspective, that location and that market is one of the most active, diverse, and discerning in the world. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned regardless. But the way that I see it for Canada, if I was a regulator up in Canada, is not necessarily just to take a look at California and say this is what we need to be, but you've actually got a wealth of diversity of experiences that you can take a look at in the US to reflect different approaches. So you've got the California, you've got the Oregon, the Washington, Colorado as being early movers out west that have approached the market in different ways and have had their own setbacks and pitfalls.
Right.
You've also got the east and the southeast, where you've had more restrictive, slower development and sometimes vertically integrated ecosystems as well. I think there's just a ton of lessons to be learned from comparing these different approaches. I fundamentally believe that out of all the approaches that are out there, having reviewed them to a certain extent, I believe that California has the superior one from every characteristic that's important to our business, but I think there's lessons to be learned from every market, and that's the opportunity that Canada has that I think it has been trying to grasp towards, but you get also things that reflect regulators that are uncertain and maybe aren't applying the right business mindset or mentality. So, and I won't necessarily open up a can of worms unless you want to talk about it, but the Ontario retail situation that just happened recently, great example of that. Right. I'm curious how you perceive that one.
Well, that's, you know, you're talking about the lottery situation for the retail stores. Well, we said, you know, the news interpreted it as 25 new bricks and mortar stores, and we said, well, no, I think there might be 5 new bricks and mortar stores and 20 new bankruptcies in the space. And so that's been our attitude, is that if you're going to open up the process and make it just so randomly selective, how are you going to, like, it should be at least merit-based in some way, shape, or form in order to ensure a higher rate of success? Because if the program is a failure, then, you know, the government is in this strange position where it's like it's mishandling the administration of the emerging cannabis laws, and there are many who aren't in government who believe that government has no place in business in a free and fair market society. I happen to be one of them. That's somewhat libertarian perhaps, but So yeah, I'm watching the story unfold. The first store apparently is opening in Yorkville. The news is today, and it sounds like, okay, so the first store sounds like the people who
it's actually opening today.
No, it's not opening today, but they've there was a story in the paper.
Okay,
there's an announcement. There's a lease in place. It's in a high-end sort of strip of Cumberland Street, 20 Cumberland, I believe. And so it's obvious to me that if you're going to open a store in Cumberland Place, you've obviously got some financial firepower behind you, and you've probably got some depth of retail experience. But even if Starbucks was to identify a new location for a store, it wouldn't be able to open it in 3 months. It would take 6 months just for, the reconstruction of it interiorly. So yeah, I'm not really, I don't have a high degree of confidence in the lottery program, and I think the government's going to learn from its mistakes, theoretically, hopefully, if it's the same government that's still around by the time it is a mistake. Yeah. But so what's your take on that?
I share the same views. I mean, you use the word merit, for example. I flippantly threw out a tweet, I think, around the time that some of this stuff was happening about the fact that we don't choose astronauts based on lotteries. There are certain types of things that are really hard and difficult and critical and important that meritocracy is often the best solution, even if you do want fairness and democracy inherent in the process. So I agree with not having licenses just issued to a handful of select players that have the most capital. I think that would be the wrong result, but the far extreme has led to almost like a farce in our case of what has happened. And we were part of the active process that happened of reaching out to every one of these 25 people that were on that list and calling them and saying, do you want to work with us? Because we are an operator, we have tons of locations out there, and that was part of our background. We tried to and stuck to all the rules that are in place that we understood from the government, which, again, very hard to decipher what the intention was, but seems like they wanted to have a very strong distinction between ownership, control, and what was happening in those stores and third parties being involved. So the thought was that whoever gets a license is supposed to own it, control it, direct it, at least from my understanding. So we tried to stick within those lines and also try and strike rational deals if possible. We were not successful because there were no rational deals to be had. Everybody that was out there in the market was going out there with ludicrous proposals. I saw one announced a handful of days ago that seemed to suggest that a minority equity position was being vended in for one of these assets, and from my understanding of the rules, that seemed to at least violate the spirit, if not the actual black letter law. But I can only observe, I can scratch my head, but at some level when it gets too irrational, we just look back and say, we'll just keep delivering and hopefully this market will sort itself out. And that's coming back to full circle why we're operating primarily in California right now and taking a careful and calculated approach in Canada.
Wow. Great analogy, or great analysis, Afzal. Thanks very much for joining us today. Now, coming up, Sean Dollinger will be here, but Ed has had an interview. Ed is going to interview first the CEO of West Red Lake Gold Mine. But before we get to that, here's some education.
Earth Ed. Wake up, Ed. I think my years of smoking pot have kept me in a bit of, instead of sitting around working or doing shit, you just sit around and go, oh, where do we come from? Because I think everybody asks at some point, where do we come from and where are we going? And you can arbitrarily say whatever you want, but how do you know you're right? But there is one thing I'm pretty certain of. If you think about the sun, here's something that's relevant. Famous, I probably said this before, I'll say it again. Famous astrophysicist, Krauss is his name. He's on the sort of the interview circuit, and he sought after, and he's written some interesting books. Like one of his books is called Something from Nothing. He explains how actually something can exist that came from nothing. Okay, the top guys. He said one of the most poetic things he can tell you is that the atoms in your left hand come from an exploded star, and the atoms from your right hand come from an exploded star, but different exploded stars. In other words, some of the elements that exist on our Earth can only come from the furnace that's created when a star explodes. Earth Ed. Wake up, Ed. Joining me now, We have Tom Meredith, who's the executive chairman of West Red Lake Gold Mines, exploration company in Red Lake. Tom, how's it going?
Going well, Ed. How about you? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, so you just came out with some news on some recent drilling. It looked like some of the best drilling you've had in a while.
Yeah, we did have good results. We started drilling in a new zone. In previous years, we'd be drilling on our best known zone, which is one which has 3 former producing mines on it. At one of those locations, we have a 1 million ounce resource of 7.5 grams. And now,
so you have a 1 million ounce.
We have a 1 million ounce resource. Yeah,
okay.
At the Rowan mine, the old Rowan mine. So we call it the Rowan mine resource. It's almost 1.1 million ounces of 7.5 grams.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, but you're tied in with Goldcorp on this project.
We are. Goldcorp is our joint venture partner on the Rowan mine property, which is the biggest part of our property and the most prospective part of our property.
So when you say you have 1 million ounces, you got a piece of that, and Goldcorp has a piece of that.
Right. We're 60-40.
Okay.
We're the operator.
Yeah, but that's still a lot of gold. That's a billion. Well, with Canadian dollar where it is, that's like a million ounces is like $1.6 billion or something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of metal value in the ground.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's hot ground, Red Lake.
It's good ground. It's very good ground. It's historically a very good camp. That camp is what made Goldcorp.
And this new area, is this joint venture ground or no?
It's on the same property. It's a zone that the zone with the 3 mines on it runs east-west, and the one that we just drilled, called the NT zone, runs northeast, and it actually intersects with the main zone, the east-west zone. So we're a few hundred meters south of the Rowan mine resource, and we started at the south property boundary and started drilling from there. We're heading northeast up into the property, and we got good results there, and we're going to continue drilling that zone. It's about 2 kilometers in length. The first kilometer is very straightforward geology, which is fairly predictable to drill. The second kilometer is much more complex. It has porphyries and other things in it. That's in what we call the structural intersection area, or some people call it the hinge zone. And that's where the bigger prospects are to find an elephant. But we're going to start with the easier part first and follow it into the more promising area in terms of high prospectivity. But the first kilometer is much more predictable.
You know, I often hear executives from mining companies, and especially in the exploration area, talk about hinge zone, but that's a generic term, right?
It's a generic term.
That's where two trends hit? Is that?
Well, it can be where 2 trends hit or 1 trend bends. And the importance of a hinge or a fold is that it creates an opportunity for a bigger pooling of resource, gold. So if you're in narrow zones that don't fold or bend or hinge, then your zones are going to be fairly narrow. But if you have a hinge, it creates a much bigger opportunity.
You can go through both of them, right?
It can go through both. It creates an opening for a much bigger deposit. Is what it does, and that's what happened at Goldcorp at the Red Lake mine, and that deposit's roughly about 100 feet in diameter of high-grade material, and it took that company from roughly 50 million market cap to 8 billion on one zone that was found in a structural intersection type environment, or a hinge type environment. Yeah,
now the ticker is RLG.
That's right.
Geez, I have a mental lapse here. I was going to ask you something about the stock, but how many shares?
We have 130 million shares outstanding.
And I know in the past we've chatted, and I've done some work with you, and in the past, you have some pretty loyal long-term shareholders.
Well, we do, and many of them came along with me from the previous company which I ran, which is VG Gold, where we had a project in Timmins. We developed it from 60,000 ounces up to about a couple million ounces, and then sold it. That company sold for roughly $200 million.
Wow.
And so our shareholders were happy, and they were happy with the way that we developed the property and the resource. And so many of them one of the key ones asked me to come and get involved in this company, and many others have followed me. So we're just trying to do the same thing, create a success for shareholders.
And your land package, it's sufficient that you're not going to run out of targets. So there's like all kinds of places to drill there.
We have, in total, we have a 12 kilometers east-west strike length, and then another 2 kilometers where we're drilling now on the sort of the northeast strike length. So we have a lot of strike length to drill. There's lots of room to drill, and you can find a very valuable gold deposit inside an area of a couple hundred meters in length.
Yeah, they say that a lot of times you get great mines in 1 or 2 claims, right? Like,
yeah, in less than a claim.
In less than a claim, especially in this area.
Right.
This is elephant country.
It is, because what you get is very high-grade shoots that can be, you know, when I mentioned the Gold Corp one, it was in a mine that they've been mining for 50 years, the Dickinson mine, and then in the mine, deeper down, they found this one high-grade shoot that was probably about 100 feet in diameter, and that created a huge amount of value for shareholders. So that's a fairly small, discrete deposit in size, but huge in terms of creating value for shareholders.
Now I noticed that when you released the news on this last press release, the volume skyrocketed those next days or two, right?
Yes, that was nice to see. It was nice to see that there was strong interest.
It's starting to change a bit. You get the sense of it, but it's turning slowly.
The market's turning slowly, and I think in some ways it's correlated to the interest rate market. As interest rates stop going up and level out and then start going down, that's going to have a very good effect for the gold market.
It looks like if they get too aggressive with rates here, that could put a kibosh on world growth, and they don't want that to happen.
That's certainly the concern, and they've run into that. The rest of the economies around the world have already slowed down.
You're looking at everybody's warning. Everybody's It looks like we've hit a wall.
Some of the air is coming out of the balloon for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, are you drilling right now?
We just finished. We're just starting to plan our next drill program, and we're just going to continue marching along the zone to the northeast.
Are you funded for that drill program?
We have some funding, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's nice to have funding.
Yeah.
And what's your, well, I guess it does appear that gold will move contra to the interest rate direction.
Yeah, it's like the bond market. I mean, the bond market treats gold like a AAA zero coupon bond. So when interest rates go down, gold goes up, and the bond market money goes into it. And then the rest of the money starts to follow into the stocks.
Now, are you familiar with this company, Great Bear?
Yes.
They're in the Red Lake area, aren't they?
They are.
But how far away would they be?
We're about 15 kilometers west of the Gold Corp's main mines, and they're about 15 kilometers.
Okay.
South.
So it's
in the same camp.
Yeah, and I think they're capped about 175 million, something like that.
They're over 100 million now, I think.
Yeah, maybe 100 and a quarter. But the point is, you're capped right now at probably what, 18, 20 million or something like that? Yeah,
like 15 million.
15 million. Yeah. Wow.
So so it shows you they had two or three good drill holes, and that brought a huge amount of interest into
like bonanza stuff, right? Bonanza stuff.
Yeah. And they're hunting for an elephant. And that's what's got their story going strong. And I mean, we have potential for an elephant in our property too. Plus, we already have 1 million ounces, and where we're drilling now, we think we can add to that. So
yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Now I know you're a tenacious guy, and you don't give up.
No, giving up's not part of the equation.
No. But look, the way gold does look like. The charts are starting to look constructive. And I thought we were going to start moving in maybe last May, and went to sleep. But it does look like things are starting to get a bit. So maybe some stagflation is coming into the picture.
It could be, but let's put it this way: the capital looks like it wants to flow into our sector now. It's just starting to, and that's the key. When capital flows into our sector, then
for sure
we get the sale.
Sure. Now you probably can't be specific, but are you talking to any bigger mines? Or, I guess you're already locked up with.
We're partners with Gold Corp.
Yeah, you're already talking to.
They're fairly big. Yes. Yeah.
Tom, really appreciate you coming on the show. and we're going to leave it there. And would like you to have you back down the road a bit to finish telling the story.
Well, thank you, Ed. Would love to do that.
All right.
Arthritis is a very potentially debilitating condition. It affects millions of Canadians, and there's actually a lot of different forms of arthritis. The most common form that most of us think of when we hear the word arthritis is osteoarthritis, and so that is typically the wear and tear that most people eventually, especially if they live long enough, will experience on the joints, and that can be arthritis of the shoulders, the knees, the hands, and that's just your general wear and tear. And what people who experience this type of arthritis, what they usually complain of is that sometimes they have a mild amount of stiffness, but as the day gets on and they start to use those joints, the inflammation starts to get worse and the pain starts to get worse. Another form of arthritis, though, that a lot of people don't typically talk about is inflammatory arthritis. And so you can consider this as a slightly more severe form of arthritis where, in addition to the inflammation, it's actually your immune system is kind of attacking your joints. Regardless if you have osteoarthritis or inflammatory arthritis, one of the main goals is managing pain. And so when it comes to pain management, you're stuck with anti-inflammatories, which are your Advils or your naproxens of the world, Tylenol, or opioid painkillers. And sometimes steroid injections work, but if you have multiple joints, it's hard to inject steroids all over the body. Nonetheless, cannabinoids have become extremely popular, and the Arthritis Society here in Canada, they mention that almost 1 in 2 of their members reports using cannabis for arthritis. It's typically osteoarthritis that patients are using cannabis for, but what we're seeing in the clinic is that this is a huge burden to society, and a huge number of referrals coming in come for arthritis. A lot of the patients will use high CBDs typically, and what they'll come back and report is that their joints feel a little bit more fluid, they're having a reduction in the inflammation, and they feel like their functioning has improved. Some patients will use a little bit more THC, but it's usually in the evening where the pain will affect their ability to sleep, so they'll use a little bit more THC, and that will help them sleep. And sleep is really important to managing your mental health, and if you're in a chronic stress state, then your pain is also going to be worse the next day.
We were actually the first health charity to have a focused call on medical cannabis to understand what impact it has on arthritis patients. But coupled with that, if something is being used as a medicine, we think that it should be treated as such. So things like it needs to be taken in the context of a healthcare provider, making sure that it's monitored properly, but also people should have access to medical cannabis the same way they have access to their other medications. So right now, people actually can only obtain medical cannabis through mail order, as one example, which could be challenging. Unlike other medications, you would pay tax on medical cannabis, which is not something that we expect or is true for any other medication. So there are a number of things that we think that if something is being used properly as a medicine, it should be treated as such. And we also know that many people who are authorized to use medical cannabis are actually taking it for arthritis. So in that context, we've heard a lot from arthritis patients about what medical cannabis, the impact that it has on their disease. Most importantly, we want to make sure that at the Arthritis Society, we're trying to speak on behalf of patients and patient experiences. And for something that's been authorized for almost 20 years now, we hope that people can have access to medical cannabis in the way that they should. But really emphasizing that there is so much to learn, and we don't want to jump to conclusions, but we want to make sure that we're paying close attention to medical cannabis and giving it the attention and resources that we think it deserves.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com. We're joined now by Sean Dollinger, founder of Namaste Inc. Sean, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me on, James.
Sean, bit of a surprise, I'm going to say it. It's just a surprise. Palace coup, I don't know what you call it. the existing, or the board of directors at Namaste has tried to terminate your contract. You're initiating a legal response. I don't want to jeopardize your legal response by asking the wrong thing, but first let me just ask you, does the representations put out in the press release by the board of Namaste, as it currently stands ex of you, is any of that accurate?
Well, let's start off by going back to that it's a special committee that went ahead and did this. And just for the record, obviously, like you said, I started this company from scratch with Corey Zellickson, who we co-founded this basically from my garage just 5 years ago, right? And we've worked extremely hard, and over those years we've put everything into it. And then the special committee, obviously, that was put together to make this decision were two individuals, right? It's basically Lawrence Finstra and Brandon Spikes, who joined the board just last March. But they haven't really been involved with the day-to-day or understanding what this company is really all about. You know, like for example, Brandon Spikes, I've never even met him face-to-face. He was supposed to come in last Friday for the whole meeting and the interview to review all the findings, and he lost his passport while he was at the airport, and he doesn't even come in for the meeting to meet face-to-face. And even our board calls, the whole time on board meetings, he would be busy doing other things. And then Lawrence, who works for Google, he was very busy over there. He's working on their whole self-driving unit. So all of a sudden they were brought into a situation that they're not used to. They've only sat on one board ever, and that's Namaste Technologies board. So this is all new to them.
Okay, and how much of their money have they invested? How much shares in the company do they own?
Yeah, they never went ahead and invested in the company the whole time they've been directors on the company. As well, their options are way out of the money. So essentially they've been working for pretty much free.
I see. And how many shares, how much of the company do you have?
Well, I have over 20 million shares in the company. I believe that works out to roughly 6% of the company. And I've got everything invested in there.
Okay, so then what is the, what about the allegations in the actual press release, the results of the special committee? I mean, if the special committee was appointed by just two individuals, managed by two individuals who were absent from the business, I'm curious as to, how is the flow of information to the auditor and the legal firm retained in that case decided?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that. So this is all based off a report that, I don't know if you remember, we did a bought deal late in the fall for roughly $55 million. That was done by the investment bank. And these allegations by Andrew Left and Citron came out, and he's known as a short seller, and he does a really good job at looking at things and then obviously putting a different spin on them, right? And that then triggered this investigation.
This is the same guy who's suggesting Kronos at $13 before it shot up to $30.
Exactly.
Right.
So basically those allegations were then looked at, because we were in the middle of a bought deal, and I'm sure you could comment on how much goes into these bought deals, like how much work goes into them. So it didn't happen after the bought deal or before the bought deal. During the bought deal, these allegations come out. Not only did Gowlings, not only Castles and Brock, not only the Ontario Securities Commission, the BC Securities Commission, as well as the TSX Venture, they all dug really deep. They asked questions. Questions went back and forth. And they found no problem as we closed that finance. So it's basically, they're looking at the facts the wrong way. There's absolutely nothing that's ever been done wrong.
Okay, so your legal challenge, without going into detail, are you interested in regaining control of the company and continuing to develop the company? I mean, I'm looking at the press release issued by the remaining board that they're seeking strategic alternatives, which is essentially equivalent of saying we don't have any idea what to do with this, so we're going to sell it. And if two people who are not involved in the day-to-day obviously have no understanding of what you've built with Corey, I just don't understand how, I mean, don't you have the biggest single block of shares and you have a huge retail support? Is it your intention to sort of pursue a proxy fight for regaining the CEO?
Yeah, I won't comment on that, but we do have close friends and family. Like, you see the way the company is, and I consider our shareholders our friends, right? Like, that's the relationship. So we know where over 100 million shares are. So, you know, that's definitely an opportunity there, an option. You know, just to make sure everybody's clear on this, it wasn't a board decision. It was two individuals who were made of a special committee here that decided for our thousands upon thousands of shareholders. We've got to remember, at the end of the day, this company was started 2.5 years ago with a market cap of just $6 million.
On the public context.
On the public context.
Right.
And, you know, we've went higher than $1 billion, and we were still sitting at $450 million with, you know, $60 million, $70 million cash in the bank and having a fantastic plan. So, you know, this doesn't really make sense at the end of the day. And if they, you know, for your viewers and listeners, anybody who wants to go down to the Ontario Superior Court, and again, they heard us in 48 hours from 24 hours, because the release came out Monday. By Tuesday morning, we were in front of the judge, and he was actually reviewing this case. And that's not only against Namaste Technologies. Lawrence Finstra and Brandon Spikes are both named in that as well.
Okay, well, that's it's really intriguing, and I wish you luck in your pursuit, and we're going to have to leave it there for now.
Well, we want the best for our shareholders and investors at the end of the day, and I will not stop till I help them out.
All right, Sean, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Coming up is the CEO of iAnthus Capital Holdings. Hadley Ford is joining us. But first, did you know?
Despite the YouTube videos, it's just not funny when Fido is high. The American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals says calls about pets getting high from accidentally eating either edible weed products or the cannabis plant itself have jumped 765% in a decade. The charity runs a poison control center that operates a 24-hour hotline. They normally get calls about dogs eating chocolate or a cat chewing a houseplant. But from 2008 to 2018, calls about pets consuming marijuana jumped from 203 to 1,800. They think it's due to the legalization of medical marijuana in so many states and people being careless. So here are the facts. Animals have a higher sensitivity to THC, and although it's rare that eating weed will be fatal to your pet, it's not even close to healthy. At the very least, this could land you with an overnight visit to the vets and a whopping big bill.
iAnthus Capital Holdings owns and operates licensed cannabis cultivation, processing and dispensary facilities throughout the United States. iAnthus announced that they have acquired all of the issued and outstanding common shares of MPX Bioceutical Corporation. The combined company now has operations in 11 states that will permit iAnthus to operate 63 retail locations and 15 cultivation and processing facilities. They have retail and production capabilities in Arizona, Maryland, Nevada, California, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, which include existing assets in New York, Florida, Massachusetts, Vermont, Colorado, and New Mexico. iAnthus Capital Holdings trades on the CSE under IAN.
And I have had the pleasure of conversing with Hadley Ford more times than probably any other CEO in the business. Hadley, how are you?
And you still come back for more.
I just can't help myself. Yeah, exactly. Where are you?
I am in our boardroom in New York City.
Oh, okay.
So we were, this was ground central last night as we crossed the final T's and dotted the I's, and I've been going around meeting institutional investors here in New York who've had an interest in the deal all day long.
Okay.
But I rushed back to the office to meet with you.
Oh, the cockles of my heart are now warmed. Okay, so just
leave your cockles out of there.
For the benefit of viewers who might not be familiar with the iAnthus purchase of MPX or merger or whatever it actually is, and I'm saying that on behalf of some viewers who are not exactly sure how it all is. Give us a recap of exactly what you're doing with the MPX acquisition.
Oh, sure. So there's three keys to success in the U.S. cannabis market. You want to have a footprint that is moving towards national, because that allows you to build a brand, which I think is a big determinant of value going forward. The second piece is you want to make sure that you're able to finance that at a reasonable cost of capital. And the third is, because you're going to have these national brands, you have to have a team that can replicate that process over and over and over again, market by market. Someone's opening up the chocolate bar in Massachusetts, it has to be the exact same experience in Florida, or you're not really building a national brand. So MPX checks all three of those boxes. Obviously, it took our footprint from 6 states to 11. We had one overlapping state. From a cost of capital perspective, obviously a much bigger float, much bigger trading volume should drive down our volatility, should bring down that cost of capital for us. And the third piece, they've proven to be great operators in the states that they're in. We can now begin to benchmark and take those best practices across our entire network. So it's just a win-win-win across all three of those boxes.
Wow, fantastic. And so now, upon completion of the merger, which I guess is today, what now is the total sort of asset package that iAnthus controls?
It's a great question, and we have shown a tremendous ability to scale over the last year and a half. If you looked at us 18 months ago, I think we had 20 employees and probably 40 million of assets. Here we are 18 months later, 450 employees and over 420 million Canadian dollars worth of assets. So we've been able to scale that. The pro forma company's done over 17, I guess probably exactly 17 transactions to build the company, showing our ability to grow through M&A. And the combined company has raised about $360 million, showing our willingness and ability to raise capital to finance the build out of all those companies.
Okay, so in a nutshell, iAnthus at this point, would you say, is it safe to consider it as a vertically integrated ISO and as a multiple state operator?
That would be unfair. I think that hits it square on the head there. We are an owner-operator in 11 states. We're actually operating in 10. Recent license win in New Jersey, but we haven't started any construction there.
Right. Now, Hadley, I want to ask you about one of the things that I like about iAnthus relative to other multi-state operators in the United States is that you have
a good-looking CEO. Don't say it; it'll just embarrass you.
That's right. I wasn't gonna take that low-hanging fruit, but I like the fact that you haven't used your stock as currency in such a way that I've seen others where they offer an inflated share price package or share trade, which ultimately is unfairly dilutive to earlier shareholders. So you've always maintained this idea of paying, a reasonable multiple on value, and so that's kind of the disciplined approach to growing the company through acquisition that makes me an investor in the company. Is that sort of key to your strategy in growing?
Yeah, discipline is key, and I think you also touched on just the public nature. When my partner Randy and I set up this company 5 years ago, the first words out of our mouth was, what if we had a public company? So from day one, we thought of ourselves as a public company. So capital formation was public. The ability to use our shares in a tax-advantaged way for doing U.S. acquisitions was, paramount to the original structure that we did. And every aspect of it has been about being public. So we don't have multi-voting shares with, conflicts. We don't have a big share overhang. We've raised all our money in the public market, so we have a very broad float. We have over 40,000 shareholders across 4 continents. And we're very, very disciplined on the M&A front. And, it's no harm, no foul. We have a lot of relationships in the business. If you can't come to agreement on valuation, you come back in a couple of years and see if a deal can be done then. But you have to be disciplined every day, because you're public. It's not your money. We're just stewards of the capital. We're very thankful for people like yourself who've been supportive of us, and we get up every day and we work for you, and we pay close attention to that cost of capital.
Fantastic. So what's next for iAnthus then after this deal?
More of the same. I mean, the strategy is pretty straightforward. Expand the footprint, build it out in a cost-effective manner with good cost of capital, and ensure you have a team that can replicate state by state. So we'll continue to do that moving forward. On any given day, we've got 30 or 40 M&A transactions on the old spreadsheet, and we're constantly working 2 or 3 into in depth. We've grown by acquisition. Wouldn't be surprising in 2019 to see us add some more companies and begin the integration process with them.
All right, excellent update, Hadley. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Best of luck. We'll talk with you soon.
Always a pleasure, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Yeah. Great. So now we were looking at our swag bag, and our bag of swag is actually an online store in development that we are going to launch probably not until May. But we have a full range of products under development, and we are interested in the opinion of you, our audiencia, to tell us, what do you like? What do you want to see? What kind of swag should we put in the bag? What about you, Ed? Do you think we should have more bubblers and pipes or bongs? Or maybe we should focus more on apparel?
What about...
like hats. Hats? Hats.
How about apparently...
Hats. Hats. T-shirts. Hats. I'm stuck.
Why don't you, okay, cats.
Slap me quick.
How about a nice fez, maybe?
A cat.
A fez.
A fez.
Yeah.
Look, there's her T-shirt.
What about a
scrolling down now?
Put up a fez, would you please?
We don't have a fez yet, but we're going to do a fez.
I think a fez is appropriate.
I wanted to show the ball caps there. Look at these ball caps, Ed.
Where?
On the screen. Here any minute
are
now.
Ball caps caps for balls?
No, they're not. They're caps for your head, and unless your head is a ball, which in some cases, look at that.
Wow.
Is that one sharp looking off-white perfectly?
Off-white?
It's off-white. It's
I'm
white.
getting some off-white leather shoes for the spring.
Yes.
And I'm going to feature them on one of our shows.
Oh, you've got some off-white leather shoes. Now wait till you see this scrolling down even further. If you want to look at the this cool jacket. Now this is what I'm going to look at. See that?
Just saying. Just saying.
Look at this black polo. Is that not sharp? Is that hot? Can you imagine you in that?
Hey.
There's the little patch.
You know what?
I
got one word for that. Actually, it's 2 words. Head turner.
Now look at this one. This is now we're talking high fashion. All season, spring and summer polo.
Does the
with
word
hood.
Is the word couture?
Stash pockets for your weed, LSD, cocaine, ecstasy. Wait a sec, that's not legal yet. Coming soon to a public company near you. Psychedelics. Ayahuasca, San Pedro, peyote, DMT, XTC, LSD, PCP. I might be on a little of that right now. Woohoo!
Shoot 'em up, cowboy.
I'm having a little too much fun today.
What about the fact that that stock deal that Khiron's doing, that's free trading stock, you know that?
Yes, it is. Prospectus offering.
You know what that means?
Yeah. The stock's on fire. Baby's on fire.
Closed at 278.
It's closed at 278. Well, see, that's what I'm saying.
What are you saying?
Khiron's one of the most underappreciated, undervalued issuers on the planet, perhaps. And I do own the stock. Yes, I do. But
size, apparently.
But and they may soon become one of our premier marquee clients because we're having that discussion, and you know what that means. $10 share price. No, just kidding. I can't say that, can I? Yes. Disclaimer, blanket disclaimer. Everything here is bullshit. No, just kidding. Did you happen to catch the interview with Sean Dollinger on the Namaste front?
No, I didn't.
Well, you missed out on some of the best controversial, confrontational TV.
So what are you thinking here? Like, I want to hear your expert
Well, so here's the thing. I'm Switzerland, but I can't help but observe what's going on my borders.
Right.
The board of directors of Namaste, this special committee was convened by 2 guys who are essentially absentee landlords. They don't know anything about this company whatsoever. So arguably...
Do they own any shares?
They own no shares. They've never put in money into the company.
No skin in the game.
No skin in the game. No, sir.
I don't like when there's no skin in the game.
Well, who does? I don't like if I'm a shareholder of a company and a bunch of bums, now not that I'm calling anybody a bum here.
Okay, yeah, a bunch of bums.
A bunch of bums. Bums.
Yep, bums.
We're bums.
Bums.
You got bums.
Rears. Bunch of rears.
You know, guys with no skin in the game, no experience running my deal, take it over from me, which has happened to me in the past. in a former lifetime in the dot-com era. And so, you know, I look at the assets that Sean has cobbled together with Corey. They have created a sort of a really different business model.
Right.
And I don't see how somebody from you know, a large cap environment can possibly comprehend how to manage these assets into a success. You know, the thing you got to look at here is look at the financials of the company. The company was in solid footing, has been on solid footing. The transaction that's being called into question by the special committee has already been passed on and approved by Gowlings and the OSC and the BCSC, and as part of the bought deal. So
I think there's a little.
I have a hard time seeing how this has happened. So
you know what happens? It happens. It's happened before. It'll happen again. Will happen to you.
What happened to me?
What?
Well,
No,
what happened
I
to me
didn't
is
ask you what happened to you. It happened to you.
It happened to me. It happened to you. No crooning, whatever we do.
Okay.
Anyway, so I find it interesting that Sean's made this legal filing. He's retained 2 of the best compliance lawyers in Canada, and I think we're in for a bit of a bun fight. Bun fight? Sean? Man with a bun? Bun fight? Woo!
There's another kind of bun fight.
Well, there's that. Yeah, there is. But anyway, so I think that this chapter is not over by any way, shape, or form. And I think you know, we're going to start. Our next mission as a unbiased, fair platform.
Sure.
Is we're going to invite the interim CEO of Namaste to voice his side of the story. So at this point, I'm undecided, and we shall see. But it doesn't look necessarily like a slam dunk. Let's look at some charts, Ed.
Okay,
what else you got? What else happened today?
So, Reefer Al said we should get mouse pads.
Mouse pads? Like mouse pelts?
Mouse pelts.
Oh, Midas branded mouse pads. Midas branded mouse pads. That's a hell of an idea. Does anybody use a mouse pad anymore? Anyways, the control room does. Okay, well, that's good enough.
What's
apparently Daniel says I should be featured in a Wiz Khalifa song, which sure, I could do that.
What
We have a
exchange
studio.
does Khiron trade on?
Khiron is TSX Venture.
No wonder I can't get it up.
Soon to be TSX Large Cap. I'll bet if I'm a betting man.
Look at this. Look at this thing.
Trucker hat. Yeah, we got a trucker hat.
Yeah.
Now look at that.
Yeah, that's
what is that? Is that a consolidation phase unfolding before your very eyes as they raise money and get ready for
you know what?
Look at the increase in volume.
No, it broke out. It hit 313, pulled back all the way to 2 1/4 today on that news, and closed at the high of the day, 278. That's a very bullish candle today.
Reefer Aljoint says cool office organizers with Midas letter or shot glasses with a picture of Ed on it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I think you can't go wrong with that. A shot glass with your face on it.
And with my face drinking a shot.
On a shot, out of a shot glass with your face on it.
Yeah.
On the shot glass.
And it'll keep going. It's like a mirror.
It's like one of those Russian dolls.
2 mirrors. How many times when you see the mirror and you know, back and forth?
Fully Aware One suggests that a Ricky mug would sell out. Fully Aware One, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but Fully Aware One seems to only talk about Ricky. Have you noticed? You watching what's going on here? Some fans, you've got some fans, I've got a couple of fans, but Ricky, she's got some serious fans.
Lots of fans.
Yes.
Put Ricky on a mug and I'll drink from it.
Oh, actually, yes. Now the comments are flying about Ricky.
There we go. Ricky.
Raging Rick wants to point out that Heritage Cannabis is on a breakout. Big news on the horizon.
What's the ticker?
CANN on the CSE. Let's take a look at that.
Let's take a look. Thank you for that.
So this is one of my largest holdings of the year. One of my most profitable. Or actually, technically, that was last year.
On the CNSX, right?
CNX, yes.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Ed's doing that.
Wow.
What's coming up tomorrow, you want to know? Well, coming up this week yet is Data Aguirre from New Frontier Data. I don't know if you've seen, that's a horrible attempt at pronouncing her name. Anyways, Jason Zandberg is going to join us from PI Financial Corp. He is the resident cannabis expert at PI Financial. Chuck Smith is going to be here from Dixie Brands, another highly anticipated transaction in the space. So Ed, you get that chart up? We got to look at that chart before the show ends.
There it is.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show
closed
that
at
never
29.5.
Oh, we're being suggested we need a stash box, stash bag.
Look at this. Look at this volume here, folks.
Whoa.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it a little, and notice, Bollinger Bands are up, and moving average lines and volume.
Wow.
I've adjusted.
Look at that.
Look at this. This is, well, that's a big move, yeah. Four back-to-back days of 4 million plus. First time in a year. First time in 3 months. Oh, wrong pen.
Yeah. Shivet Ketostatic Bafanifi says, I hope she gets that. I hope
Look at that volume. Look at that volume. In some places they'd say volume.
Volume. Where would they say that, Ed?
Probably some places like South America.
Okay. All right, Reefer Al Joint suggests barbecue aprons. Ed, Dave Combs suggests Ed the socks. That's a good one.
Ed the socks.
They're coming. Rich TV, how is APHA fighting back against GGB? Whoa. Okay, wait a
minute now. You know, yeah, I saw something. Aphria basically quashed their takeover bid.
You can't really quash a hostile bid.
Well, they formally rejected it. Sorry. They formally
rejected it. The board has rejected the current offer.
Yeah.
Recommended their shareholders reject it. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe to our program, subscribe to our newsletter, hit the little notification bell, and we are going to have a hell of a swag situation. Rich TV Live rejecting the Haas takeover bid by GGB. What do you think is going to happen there, Ed?
I'm just going to say that some of the production people and myself are heading over to Mercado for a $5 drink. If anybody's in the area, drop by and see us. If anybody
wants to go to Mercado on Bay Street to meet Ed the Head and the technical staff in Toronto, now is the time, people.
But don't drive if there's ice on the road.